Hey gang, so we are going to jump into the Sprintwatch here in just a second. So for those of you who haven't seen this before, this is where I kind of go through primarily the progress tracker, which is this guy, and I just kind of talk about the major changes that I'm seeing and the impacts I think they'll have on the game. But before I get into that, I usually do the roadmap roundup, just kind of see what's changed on the grand scale that CIG is calling attention to, and then take a look at the release view just to kind of confirm what they've told us in the roadmap roundup, if anything. There is some interesting stuff this time. There's a lot of movement in the last couple weeks, so I'll kind of go over those and let's get into this. Okay, so if this is the first time you've seen one of these, I like to start with caveats. So caveats are that CIG uses the Agile development system. In the Agile development system, devs go in 2-week sprints on an item. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they kind of reassess and they sort of say, hey, this is a dead end. We need more assets. We need more time. Another team has to work on something. We need new tech. So this has got to be put on the back burner. You see examples of this all the time. One thing I wanted to address while I'm talking about this, there are two things I'm going to talk about at the end of this video. That after I'm done with the Sprintwatch. So if you want to hear these things, kind of stick around. Interesting tidbit. CIG was sued and they kind of settled and paid a person out. And in the process, the lawyers said that the game was released. I kind of want to get into what that means. I'll do that at the end of the show again. And the other thing I kind of wanted to do this week before I realized how many new movement things there were was actually have a little bit of prediction time and wild speculation time about what I think is coming in CitizenCon. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into that. Oh, so the caveats, most important part. So they use the Agile development system. They go in 2 weeks. Things come on and off. Things that look like they're finished may not actually be finished. Things that actually are finished in our hands might continue to be iterated on and changed up and fixed and modified, or possibly even dropped from the engine just because new tech makes it obsolete. Not unusual. So just because there's something on there that's 100% done, and I speculate that's 100% done, does not mean that it's actually 100% done until CIG is like, here you go, it's done. Even then, it might not be. On that point, leading into it, the other caveat is that I am just a dude on the internet that's just kind of drawing conclusions from a very limited information set. So everything you see here is just my opinion of what's happening. If CIG says something that contradicts what I'm saying, they are the people with the knowledge. I am not. Trust them. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll go ahead and get started with the roadmap roundup. Lots of changes this time. Notable changes for July 26, 2023. Progress tracker. The following deliverables have been added to the progress tracker. New missions. Steal evidence. These are kind of cool. They have a lot of cool new missions coming in. A criminal mission type where players are tasked with infiltrating security post Korea and stealing files from Crusader security for a hefty payout. So more SBK things, but still, that sounds kind of neat. Just kind of, again, iterating on the SBK mission right now, where you basically just go in there to get a jump town. It basically just produces random stuff and you'll occasionally get stuff that's valuable. New missions, cargo hauling. This is one we've been waiting for. Making use of the freight elevators feature. This mission will have the players hauling large quantities of cargo to earn both AUEC and reputation. That is one of the things that I speculated would be coming with the whole C. Sounds like it might be coming a little bit later, but it is coming soon, and I'll kind of get into what I think that means on that point. Actually, what the hell, I'll say it now since there's not really a good way to segue into it. Soon for CIG. So for us, when we're seeing these things in ISC and the Friday shows, or they're talking about it at SitCon, we're typically thinking maybe the next couple months to a year. I think what CIG means when they're sort of saying these things are coming together is they're thinking like within the next 3 years. So maybe even as they build these things up and build these things up and build these things up, tamp your expectations down, add 3 years to it. Then if it drops sooner, it's cool. If it doesn't, that was kind of what they meant. That is kind of what I'm zeroing in on, especially since we're rolling into year 3 or 4 on the road to Pyro. Moving on. New missions. Steal, recover cargo. Steal, recover cargo missions will see players recovering and or stealing cargo from both derelict and active ships. Then hauling the cargo to its intended destination. So you'll actually be interdicting ships to get their cargo. It's kind of cool. New missions, and I promise I won't say cool too much. I'm totally going to say it too much. New missions, restoration contracts. This is one that caught my eye. Utilizing the repair functionality of the multi-tool salvage attachment, players are tasked to restore ships from bow to stern, patching up the hull, replacing missing or faulty internal components, and replacing weapon loadouts in new salvage yard locations. That is the first time we've actually seen repair in the game as an actual loop. It was an option with the multi-tools to kind of fix your own ship. I don't know a lot of people that did that beyond the initial sort of gee whiz. Most people just land at a pad and fix their ship that way. They're not going to take the 15 minutes it takes to scrape off someone else's hull and paint it on your own when you can just land and do it for 100 space bucks. This will give you a reason to do it, depending on how much those cost. I assume they will go up to larger and larger ships, especially since you're gaining reputation on it. Very cool stuff. There's that word again. Take a shot every time. Reputation, shop discounts. Players will have the ability to receive discounts in certain shops based on their reputation with affiliated organizations. Hopefully we'll be getting like Ninetales and Xenothreat once we get Pyro. The ability to buy like illicit goods, like the really cool guns or something like that would be nice. But for example, if you're helping out Crusader, you might get discounts at Crusader. You might get discounts on Hurston weapons if you have a good reputation with Hurston. It's a thought. Reputation hostility. Players will encounter AI that are either friendly or hostile based on their reputation with the organization the AI belonged to. This also includes different friendly fire thresholds and defense responses. We've been waiting on that iteration of reputation for a long time. So that is cool. Reputation, sandbox triggers. This feature will allow players to have their reputation increase or decrease with organizations based on their action in the persistent universe, separate from missions. Key. This in turn will either allow or prevent players from accepting missions for particular organizations, which is neat. You'll start having reputation gates, which is another thing we've been waiting on for a while. Release view. The following card has been added to release view targeting the alpha 3.20.0 release, which is 3.20. Physicalized cargo updates. Adding new functionality to accommodate the release of the Mist Hull C. Again, look in the up above parts for things that I think the Mist Hull C will change more than a ship. This includes both automated cargo loading at LEO stations, low Earth orbit, as well as SEU containers up to 32 SEU. So we've long suspected that was a prerequisite for the Hull C, these 32 SEU containers, but now we get confirmation. The following card has been added to the release view, targeting an alpha 3.20.x release, so 3.21. We kind of speculated on this in the past too, that 3.20 will probably be dropping in September, so pretty early. And then they'll have a 3.21 that'll drop more around CitizenCon. They'll bring in other things, and this kind of confirms it. Crusader A1 Spirit, building, balancing, and implementing Crusader Industries light bomber, the A1 Spirit, into the game. And I have a strong suspicion the C1 will be doing the same thing in a couple weeks. I think the E1 is going to be a little ways off, the one that carries passengers, because neither the A1 or the C1 really have anything new. The A1 drops size 5 bombs, which are kind of going to be a new asset. I think the Gladiator carries size 5 torpedoes, and it's a bomber, but it doesn't have actual bombs. But this might actually bring size 5 bombs as opposed to torpedoes for the Gladiator. We'll have to find out. New Crusader platforms, new missions, retrieve consignment. Again, a consignment is just like a shopping list. Due to encountering several issues with Rastar while setting up locations, these 2 deliverables did not pass their final review and need additional work before they're released to live servers. Therefore, these features will remain tentative on the release view and will now target a 3.20.x release while remaining in the 3.20 column. Which is cool. One of the things, well, that's not cool, but one of the things that is cool is they still haven't pulled the wheeled vehicle refactor, so our vehicles won't be, ground vehicles won't be acting like helium balloons anymore, which will be nice. Not as nice as a flight physics model, but not bad. So with that said, that is the roadmap roundup. Let's jump into the release view and see what changed. So here's the release view. 3.19 is over and done with. Again, PTU version. It's actually the ePTU version. It's in Evocati. I can't really talk about that because I am Evocati, and I am a part of Evocati. I'm not the entirety of Evocati, just saying. So 3.20, tentative quarter 3, 2023. So just as a reminder, 3.19, they were saying quarter 2. And I was thinking quarter 2 would be end of June, and they ended up dropping it like in March or something. So kind of caught me off guard, and then they did a couple more patches. So that was kind of cool. I think they're going to do the same thing with 3.20, drop it in September as early as possible, maybe, and then have a 3.20.1 patch closer to CitizenCon. And hopefully that means that they're not going to... CIG's typical MO is they drop a patch on us right before they all go on vacation. And it's always a buggy, broken up mess. And for about 6 weeks, we have a patch that just doesn't work. It's crashing all the time. Hopefully they don't do that this year. So fingers crossed. So locations, this has been pretty set for a while. This one right here, the new Crusader platforms, is new. Seraphim Station will be nice to see. That's going to be the new Port Olisar. They still haven't quite told us what they're going to do with Port Olisar. I'm assuming they won't have both stations in the same spot, so find out. You might just move it to the opposite side of the planet, which would mean it'd be the only planet with 2 Leo stations. I don't know. Tentative, new mission, retrieve consignment. So there's that one, and this is the one that they're having problems with Rastar and building it out. So who knows, maybe 3.20.1. Arena Commander, all these Arena Commander ones are, well, I can't tell you what they're being tested in, but they're committed. They're pretty confident they'll get them in there. And then physicalized cargo updates is a new one, new cargo functionality, including the whole sea and supporting large SCU containers. We've now got 3 ships on here. We had the wheeled vehicle handling improvements, which they put under ships, even though it's ship handling. The Mystical Sea we've known about for a while. The Crusader A1 is on there, and my speculation is that the C1 is going to be joining it in the very near future. And that's pretty much it for this. The big thing is that we've got 3.20 in Evocati right now. It will probably be dropping to the PTU next month. So within the, I'd say probably 3 weeks or so, it'll probably drop to the PTU, and then they'll probably drop it to live early to mid-September, be my guess. Let's go on to the progress tracker. So this is the progress tracker. It comes up typically on Teams. So this is the default view. It's on 2 quarters. It's on Teams. Teams is a useful way to look at things because as opposed to just looking at individual deliverables, this looks at the deliverables per team, and you can see how many people are working on this. So you could say, okay, how many people are working on experimental game modes? There is 1 person from engineering working on it, which kind of gives you an idea of how far along it is or how quickly it'll move. Sometimes it does give you context. I like to look at the progress tracker deliverables view because it's kind of more 100-foot view. If you want the 10-foot view, you look at the teams. But the deliverables can give you a pretty good idea. So here we are, we're in week 5 of quarter 3. I think we're probably getting this patch around this area or maybe down here in week 14. But I think they'll hit that deadline. I like to set it up at 1 quarter so you kind of get the week to week view, just that how my brain works. And I've kind of gone through here and pre-gamed. I always like to open these up. So you look at this, it's just one big long bar. It doesn't really give you a lot of context. If you pop this open, you can actually see the individual teams that are working on it and when they started work and stopped work. And that can give you a lot better idea of how a particular deliverable, especially ships, and I'll get into that in a second, are doing. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start going through all the changes here. And again, at the very end of this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of talk about things. I'm going to speculate a little bit, or I might do this if this goes too long, which it might because there's a lot of changes. I'll have another vid where I speculate wildly about what I think will be its CitizenCon. It's just sometimes fun to see how close to the mark I am. So let's get on into this. So the first big change, Apoasa and Tokii, nothing's changed, but there aren't any downstream teams on that. I thought there was a good chance that we were going to begin the Tokii, which is the Xi'an medium fighter. I thought we were probably going to get it for SitCon. There's not any downstream teams. So again, when you do the drop down, there would be VFX, audio, sometimes UI. I would assume the UI would jump in because this is the first real Xi'an ship we've had in a while. And then they'd update the Car2 All to kind of adopt this in Tokiai's metrics and what's the word I'm looking for? MFDs, cockpit design. Because Car2 All is a really old ship at this point. It's kind of dated. So this will probably be their quote unquote gold standard for Xi'an and how it'll look and operate. But anyway, got a ways to go. So we're probably maybe Alien Week of next year might be an idea, but we're probably not getting it this year. AR system, map marker and rework. This one added 13 weeks to it. It was done for a little while and then they jumped in. You could sort of see that the UI tech team is the one that decided to spend a little bit more time working on it. So what does that tell me? There's about 5 or 6 things like the AR map system rework, the Mobiglass, visor HUD. There's a few things like that. They're just kind of UI improvements on the game as a whole. and I think they're going to try to drop all of those at once on one patch. I thought it was going to be 3.19, and then they kind of dropped 3.19 early, and I was like, okay, maybe not. Then I thought 3.20 maybe, but a few of these things have kind of slid a little bit further, so maybe not 3.20, but I do think they will probably drop them all at once. Maybe 3.20x. We'll just have to wait and see. So here's all the Arena Commander things. All of the Arena Commander, they added, I believe they added 20 weeks. These things were kind of done, but now that it's kind of rolled into Evocati, they're kind of taking the feedback and tweaking these, would be my guess. But we'll find out. Argo SRV. This one's huge because for the longest time, it was complete back here. But like I said, with the ships, until you start seeing the downstream teams come in, it means that that ship is not anywhere near complete. And so it was hanging back here. A lot of content creators were like, oh, we're definitely getting the Argo SRV for 3.20 because it's been done since like week 9 of quarter 1. And I was saying, no, we're clearly not, because the downstream teams haven't started working on it. Well, VFX has now jumped in on it, and their sprint is going here. Before we get the Argo SRV, of course, we have to have tractor beams in and working, and they might actually hit that. I still think the Argo SRV is a good candidate for CitizenCon, but audio isn't in on it. So until audio gets here, and probably the UI team, just because the tractor beam being used by a ship hasn't been done yet, probably going to be waiting on this one. I would think SitCon though, because Argo, they've got a pretty optimized style guide for Argo now, especially after the raft. So audio, I wouldn't think would take too long. So easy drop for SitCon. I don't think we're getting it for 3.20, maybe 3.20.1 if that's the SitCon batch. So just kind of want to talk about this one. This is a Squadron 42 asset, this character work. This is, and actually I could just kind of talk about Squadron 42 in general. I've been saying for about probably 9 months now that I kind of felt like the end of 2022 was when they moved Squadron 42 from alpha to beta. And now they're polishing it for release, which is why I think day 1 or day 2, probably day 2 of CitizenCon will be, here's the release date for Squadron 42 in 2024. End of year 2024, we're releasing Squadron 42. And now they're just in polishing mode. And I mean, you can sort of see these chapters, even though they add weeks on them. I say this every time, but expect them to just keep adding weeks on that right up until probably a month before release, because why not just keep polishing and polishing and polishing so you don't get a cyberpunk effect where you release the thing and there's game killing bugs in it. One of the things I kind of use as my barometer for Squadron 42 is character work, and they added about 40 more weeks, but even that, it looks like it's wrapping here. Will it continue to wrap there? I doubt it. Just like the chapters, they're going to keep iterating and iterating and polishing. Well, not iterating anymore. They're going to keep polishing and polishing and polishing until this is perfect. We may get knock-on effects with the character work and the character creator, again, a Squadron 42 asset in the PU before Squadron 42 drops. I certainly hope so, because I'm getting tired of the Ace Ventura hair and the beehive. Crusader Spirit, here we go. So you can see the Crusader Spirit goes all the way out here to week 12. Week 12 in December, this quarter 4, is really just kind of a holding place. That's as far as they've planned any sprint, so it doesn't mean this isn't going to stretch off the board into next year, and it definitely will. What I think this is the A1 and the C1 are back here and plan to release around here, and the E1 is what this continuing bar is. And that's the one with the passenger gameplay where we don't have the game loop for it. They don't have NPCs that can successfully walk on and off your ship. They were debating for a while. Space Tomato had a really good info dump earlier this week, where he called up an old mission set where they were talking to Presley, and Presley was saying, we've actually got it that the people can walk off your ship now, which this was months back when the interview was done. But it was interesting because they had originally considered just doing the passenger missions the way that they were doing the cargo missions. So you just have people magically appear on your ship and magically disappear when you reached a location. But they decided rather than have that tier 0 implementation, they'd do a tier 1 implementation where they'd actually walk on your ship, sit down, stand up, walk off. So in order to do that, the servers have got to be in a place and the NPCs have got to be in a place where they can do that. E1's probably a little ways off, maybe mid next year, hopefully. That might be a tad optimistic for that tech. So Fire Hazard jumped back on. This one added 11 more weeks. I think it was wrapping out here. And then the VFX team jumped back in. I don't know when we're going to get fires in the game, fire extinguishers in there. If I had to guess, they'll bring in fires when they bring in the engineering game loop. And until they bring in the engineering game loop, they're just going to keep polishing the effect until it looks amazing. The last few things we saw in it actually did look pretty good. So if they're improving on that, good on them. So fires come a long way. And this will actually spread and propagate throughout your ship if you're not careful, which is why you need the fire extinguisher. As for when engineering game loop is coming, next year sometime, I would assume they would want to drop that either right before Pyro or right after, probably not in the same patch as Pyro because Pyro is going to break things. So you don't want to drop engineering that's breaking things and Pyro that's breaking things, and then they have to figure out whether it's one or the other that's breaking things. They probably want to drop one, see what breaks, fix that, then drop the next one, see what breaks, fix that. So I don't think we'll have a Jesus patch with like 15 game loops and Pyro and everything else. I think they'll do it in steps so that they can control the bugs. Freight elevators right here. So this is sort of the next iteration of cargo. Again, it's out here in week 12 of quarter 4, which means next year sometime. So don't hold your breath for it, but there it is. Gen 12 render came back on this. Gen 12 render released in 3.18. This is what I mean by they can release something and keep iterating on it. And I often say that Gen 12 render, even though this says tier 1, I'd assume we're going to get a tier 2 at some point. Like they won't just keep iterating on tier 1. They'll have some idea what tier 2 is. But this is one that they're, again, going to keep on polishing and polishing and polishing. This is integral to Squadron 42 also, obviously, because it's the same engine. So they'll expect that one to polish right up until Squadron 42 drops, would be my guess. So life support tier 0. Again, this is out here in quarter 4. It's kind of in this weird zone, like it's not out here in week 12. So this is as far as they've planned it. But I would assume life support is one of those things that we'll get with engineering. It has to be one of the things we'll get with engineering. So one of the things that'll happen is you'll have fire breakout and it will eat the oxygen in the room, and you'll have low oxygen areas. So if you're not wearing your helmet, which CIG will have to think of a reason why people wouldn't just be in their spacesuits all the time like they are now. How many times do you actually dress in clothes? So that might be attached to reputation and NPC interaction systems. But life support tier 0 will come with engineering. So even if they wrap it here, it's not going to drop until they want to drop all the things with engineering. Will it come at the end of the year? I kind of doubt it. I'm expecting the engineering patch to be next year, but I would be real pleasantly surprised if they dropped it early. Map and radar system rework. This is another one that I think is waiting as far as like the AR map marker would make a lot of sense, since you have map and radar and you have an AR map marker system. You'd probably want to release those together. They do look like they're kind of coming coming along together, along with the MFD rework, which is right here. These have all kind of been, those three and the visor HUD, which I'm going to get to later, have all kind of been neck and neck and wrapping around the same time. And the same teams have been working on the same time. Again, these are Squadron 42 assets, so they're going to want them to look as good as possible, and they're going to polish it up until Squadron 42. Will we get it before Squadron 42? I think so. Just given how old the assets that we have in the game right now are, that would be a huge quality of life and would buy CIG a lot of goodwill from the community, which has been a bit salty lately, with and without reason. I wouldn't say it's completely unearned. Mobiglass rework, there's another one with the UI. And again, this is another one that just kind of goes neck and neck with the others. I keep thinking it's going to wrap and we're going to get it in the next patch. And then we get the next patch, it's not in there. And then a couple weeks later, this jumps out again. These have all been going on. So you can see that one's an 80-week sprint. This one's 131, but the MFD is one moving every MFD in the game over to building blocks, kind of a big deal. Map and rare system rework is a big one, 121 weeks. So when you take out their breaks, CIG's year, I would say, is probably 48 to 50 weeks, maybe closer to 48 weeks long. So yeah, just to kind of give you an idea, these things are all multi-year projects. So here's new missions cargo hauling. Again, kind of in that weird, is it going to be 3.20.1? Are they going to be dropping it right here? Like CitizenCon is October, which is, I think CitizenCon is right about here. So we're probably not getting these things for CitizenCon, which means the 3.20.1 patch is probably going to be their Christmas patch, like the last one they drop before they go on break. And they might be dropping things that are kind of easy, like new missions that they know work, just so they don't have a broken patch over their 6-week break. So again, you got cargo hauling, which the whole sea will definitely need, because in those, somebody is paying you, I want you to move 300 tons of kitty litter from point A to point B. You're not putting the money in for the kitty litter. You're not buying the kitty litter. The company is paying, they're basically renting space on your whole sea, or your whatever the cargo mover is. Usually will be the whole sea, just given the amount, but they will be able to do it with these. But you will basically, I assume, they'll have like $1,000 missions, spacebuck missions, and you are paid $1,000 to move something from point A to point B. Then there will be riskier ones where they're like, hey, likelihood of pirates on this, so this one will pay you $20K to move our goods from point A to point B. And again, they're just renting space on your ship. But you'll have to probably hire escorts, or at least gunners for your turrets, which, by the way, 3.20, two of my org mates and myself are going to try to fully crew a whole sea for the duration of it up until 3.20.1. Maybe longer if it's fun, but just kind of try to run a whole sea that's actually crewed up, because I think a lot of people are going to solo the whole sea, and I think that's a huge mistake. I think the whole sea will be the #1 boarded and pirated ship in the verse, just because the amount of cargo it's carrying, and people will try to take it intact and then fly off with it and sell all that stuff and make tons of money. Data heist, new mission. Go in, steal data, infiltrating locations, often held by NPCs. Interesting that they have often there. Reaching data stores and setting data to upload to offsite handlers. I am hoping those will be missions like Hitman, where you actually have to infiltrate. Like that infiltrating locations, that says to me dressing up in a disguise and fitting in and kind of sneaking in, as opposed to walking into a bunker, shooting everyone, and hitting the button on the console. If it's that, this mission failed. Restoration contracts. So this one looked neat. Sorry, was sitting on my foot and is going to sleep. Restoration contracts. This is the one where you go and you have to siphon off the skin off of one ship, presumptuously, he says, and spray it on a ship that is, it says bow to stern. So you're going to get something with zero skin on it, and you're likely going to have to get enough RCU to actually coat the entire ship. And again, I would assume they're going to go in a lot like the salvage missions do now. They'll say cover a 300i, and then they'll have the biggest one, which is cover a reclaimer, and good luck, hope you have a lot of RCU. And one day that'll be the kind of missions that Crucibles will do. New missions: steal, recover cargo. Again, not coming with the whole sea, but maybe coming at the end of the year. Both derelict and active ships, that whole interdicting active ships, NPC ships, and stealing their cargo is new. We haven't seen that. So again, NPCs have got to be acting accordingly. So fingers crossed. Origin X1, just kind of want to talk about this one. I still say we get the Origin X1 for the Christmas patch. No downstream teams yet, but it's a small space bike, shouldn't be an issue. I would expect it at the end of the year. They might be holding off for the 600i gold standard, but we haven't heard about the 600i for almost a year now, I think. It's been a while. They might have talked about it in Q3 of last year, but it's been a while since we've heard about the 600i. I was thinking they were going to try to drop those two at the same time, but it doesn't look like that's the case. Persistent streaming and server meshing. This is one they are never going to stop working on streaming and server meshing. It's the core killer feature of this game is the whole persistence. So yeah, this is just going to keep going and going. Physical damage and breakability. This is Maelstrom. If you hear them talk about Maelstrom, it's this. I believe this is also related to salvaging and vehicle munching. Tomorrow, likely by the time this video gets uploaded, we might be hearing about physical damage and breakability, because you actually have to break up the ship to be able to eat it. But this will also be so when large objects such as ships are damaged by weaponry or colliding with other ships, locations, or planets. So on top of being able to tear the ship up and eat it, it's also going to be, if you land hard, your ship might break in half. Could be cool. Ropes are back on there. Again, this is one that they have not talked about. The assumption, since they say interacting with pulleys, is that it might be sort of a low-tech way of interacting with cargo. Like if you land at an outpost in Pyro that doesn't have the freight elevators, you might actually have to use pulleys to move those big 32 SCU boxes around, just because they don't have the tech to do otherwise. It could also be related to exploration, like going down in caves, like rappelling down and climbing up, which they have actually shown in promotional videos before, like for the Carrack. But we don't actually know. Visor HUD, this is the one that I was talking about. Again, all of those kind of seem to be on the same sprint schedule. And they're kind of going neck and neck. Again, it's a Squadron 42 asset, so will we get it before Squadron 42? Or will they save all these UI things for a gee whiz factor on Squadron 42? Don't know. It would be nice if we got this beforehand, because, again, those assets are dated. So here's Rastar. Rastar added another 14 weeks. So when they were talking about some issues with Rastar, and it delaying some of those missions. This is a feature that they're talking about. So Rastar is the system that they use to create outposts and locations and things like that. It's the tool that they use for that. Eventually it'll be what the Pioneer uses to build outposts and stations and player-owned locations. One of my wild speculations, I am going to do as another video because this one's running a little bit long, but one of my wild speculations, I'll give you a bonus, is that they will have a Rastar talk and we'll be able to make small space stations, I think, or asteroid bases. Asteroid bases would be a good way for CIG to kind of control the size. Another way, for those of you that have played Subnautica, in Subnautica, as you build larger, your base becomes harder and harder to pressurize. It starts becoming unstable and you get leaks and stuff like that. They might implement a similar system where there's structural integrity problems, but again, like building a space station in a vacuum. But I don't know. That's my speculation, is that they're either going to let us build space stations up to a certain size, like they'll somehow limit that so you can't build something like Spider, which in lore is, I think, like a planet's almost, well, okay, not planet sized. It's a very, 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 very large station that's just kind of a mismatch of tons of different ships. And it's going to be real interesting how CIG builds that one. They kind of dug themselves a hole. That was written back in the days before they had planet tech. So it would be that you'd fly up on something and just see this big, confusing, jumbled mass, and then you'd have a cutscene and land on it. Now, it's going to be a jumbled mass that you can fly around physically. Will they be able to pull it off? Probably. They pulled off ArcCorp. Anyway, Reputation also coming. A lot of these look pretty good for a 3.20.x mission. So, I mean, you got those two. The Hostility one is the one that's kind of iffy. But it's still there. So, I mean, 3.20.1, I would say this is kind of the golden area for that, is around that week 7. So if it gets there, might be okay. Might make it in. Resource management. So this is the key tech for engineering. We are not getting engineering before we get resource management. And you can see it's out here in week 12, which means next year. That just means that's as far as they've got it planned. It's a next year asset. RSI Polaris, I just like to point this one out every time because people really, really, really want this ship. It's 37 weeks and we are about halfway through that 37 weeks. It's not 37 weeks. They're just, this is again, the planned sprints. So right now, I think they have a guy kind of doing the white box, the actual sort of physical construction. The components will go here. We need roughly this room for the large hangar bay. Torpedoes will go here. Landing elevator will go here. Landing gear will go here, kind of a thing. That's what this guy's doing. And I'm guessing that is that sprint. Actually, let's look here. So I popped over to the teams view here, and you can see that it's 37 weeks. So it's the same sprint. They have got 7 people working on the art on this thing. Now, the interesting thing about the RSI Polaris, one of the many interesting things, is that it is also a Squadron 42 asset. So they are kind of on a timeline on this. The one exception to that would be if it was a later chapter, like if it's Squadron 42 Part 2, then they could kind of delay this out if it comes in later stages, which it probably would. We're probably not going to encounter the Polaris in that game until we encounter the Vandul, and I don't think we encounter the Vandul in the first part. That will probably be the end of the hero's journey, the next part, where it's kind of like, yay, I've beaten the bad guys, and all of a sudden now the Vandul are coming in. It's like, oh crap. And then you'll start seeing all these new ships. But anyway, there are 7 people. Art. It's the art team. They're not building the ship yet. They're planning the ship. So this 37 weeks does not mean 37 weeks. This thing will have, I have said for a while, I wouldn't be shocked if we get it around Christmas of next year. That would be, or CitizenCon of next year. I would say that would probably be where the window opens. The window probably closes June of the following year, June of 2024. Either way, you're not getting, you will start to be able to see a lot of progress on this thing at the end of next year. So the end of 2024. Salvage vehicle munching. So I just want to mention this one because they're going to show it on ISC tomorrow or later today, depending on how fast this uploads. Again, it's a week 12 asset, which means next year sometime. So this is kind of one of the things that gets CIG in trouble, is they're going to show this on ISC. So in our brains, we're thinking, well, you wouldn't show us this feature if you weren't planning on dropping it soon. And soon in our brain is, oh, wow, is this coming in 3.20? Is it coming at the end of the year? No, this thing is going to be next year sometime. It might be a full year off or more. Maybe we get it in the first quarter, but we're not getting it this year. So temper your expectations during next time's or tomorrow's ISC. Unless you see this jump all the way back to here, but I wouldn't expect it. You're going to have a UI team. There's not a UI team on here yet. So as far as barometers on Squadron 42 go, this is another one that I use. Again, this is the Squadron 42 vehicle support. These are all, if you're ever wondering why progress on ships in the PU, like PU specific ships, are slow, this is why, because they're all working on Squadron 42. And again, week 12, end of the year, it's going into next year. That doesn't mean that Squadron 42 couldn't be on a release target for next year, next Christmas, 2024. Because they're going to polish the ships and polish the ships and polish the ships, just like they are all the Squadron 42 assets. Tumbrel Stank, looking pretty good. Again, no downstream teams. It is a small tonk, so could they get it to us by 3.20.1? Yeah, I think so. I think they might even be able to get it, depending on when they drop 3.20. Like if they drop 3.20 over here, I can actually see that making it in. Because you need audio and VFX working on it, which that's about 2 months, 2.5 months. That's enough time for them, in my opinion, as a non-VFX audio person. But if it's not in 3.20, 3.20.1, if it comes around Christmas time, I mean, that's an extra, what, 4 or 5 months? I think they could do that. All right, so now we get down into more wild speculation here. So we've got a few ships here. This one is a straight to flyable, 34 weeks. There's a few on here. We know that the Mirai Fury LX, the racing version, is coming to us. This one is pretty small. 34 weeks is small. I think that this one is probably the RTV, the sort of Jeep version of the Steve. You will note VFX is a downstream team. It's working on it. Coming at the end of the year. So that would probably be our Christmas patch. I wouldn't be shocked if we got the RTV. Yeah, it's totally a possibility. Here's another one. So this is interesting. So this is the Montreal team. I've been saying since they dropped the Montreal team on here, we don't really have a basis of comparison for Montreal. So we don't know if they build big ships really quickly, or if they just build small ground vehicles, or if they're just doing sort of the art behind things, like if they have the typical sprints. Like most of the ships for the other teams, they'll go through a concept sprint and then they'll go through an actual building it out sprint. It doesn't look like Montreal is doing that, but it might just all be integrated. So we're not actually seeing the vehicle concept team in this. Or this is the vehicle concept team. We don't know. So until we get our first Montreal vehicle, we don't have context for what 27 weeks means. 27 weeks might be something like the Ranger, and because they had to spin up the Montreal team, it's them learning all of the ways that CIG builds ships now. And it took them a long time to ramp up. Or it could be 27 weeks is still a pretty small ship. 27 weeks is about what you see for a starter, something small. So, I mean, that could potentially be the RTV too. The thing about the Montreal team is they're exclusively the PU team. So they will be building assets that are just going to be used in the PU and won't have any roles in Squadron 42. I am guessing that is CIG's way of mollifying the community when they move into next year and they're all polishing for Squadron 42. There's not going to be a lot of content released for the PU because it's going to be all hands on deck to get Squadron 42 out the door. So you might start seeing the Montreal team roll out a bunch of medium to small vehicles that have been kind of on the back burner for a while, like the Ranger, the RTV, some smaller ships that are kind of a surprise possibly, but there's some possibilities here. So again, 23 weeks on this one. We don't know if this is a concept or an actual straight to flyable. We just don't have that context yet. Both of these might be dropping in 3.20 or 3.20.1 or next year sometime. We don't know. One of these is going to be the Fury LX, which I am thinking is probably this one, this 11-week sprint, because 11 weeks is zero time for building a ship. And if it's the LX, that would make sense, the racing version of the Fury, because all they'd have to do is take off the guns and maybe make the engine slightly larger. So I think this is the Fury. So that kind of begs the question of what's this and what's this? These are concepts, and concepts can drop at any time. Those are basically just the JPEGs. And there's a few ships that have been JPEGs for years. I think we're not getting those until we get either certain mechanics like boats, like things that float on the water, or pyro, or Squadron 42 drops. I don't think that we're getting those. I would think one of those is actually the Titan suit, like one of these guys that they've had around forever, but they just haven't released to us for whatever. Like a lot of these things up here have been done for years, literally years. These guys are new. So I think this RTV, I think this is the LX Fury, which means what's this guy? 27 weeks. Not a big thing, probably a vehicle. So you got 34 weeks. Not very big, probably a ground vehicle, probably a ground vehicle. So what are they? We don't know. We don't know how the Montreal team works yet. Vehicle tractor beams, you're not getting the Argo SRV until this drops. Does look like it's kind of on target for 3.20.1 though. And we know the whole C has tractor beams to help load it and unload it. Will they be working in 3.20? Probably tied to this. So this might be an indicator of 3.20, but then they'd miss that Q3 window. I would guess what vehicle tractor beams are going to do is we'll get the Argo SRV and vehicle tractor beams in 3.20.1. That's my thought. And gang, that's it for this one. Keep an eye out for that wild speculation. I didn't want to make this one hours long, and so yeah, I'll just do that one in a separate vid. Other vids I'm debating working on, which I left this comment on my socials and YouTube, however you want to say that, just kind of the area where feel free to talk to me over there, because if you want to know more about a certain subject, I've been debating doing a Q&A, but I kind of like to do more tightly focused things outside of this. I really want to do in the next, hopefully this weekend, I'm going to be rolling out one on smaller content creators I do. So before, I did a vid on content creators that I follow, like the big ones, the people that actually get paid to do this, and this is their job. So think Board Gamer, Super Mac Brothers, Ryan, Salty Mike, those kinds of guys, Tomato, that either supplement their income or this is their whole job. These guys that I'm going to be talking about in this one are all small people. So they're like me. They're doing it for a hobby. While I have the goal to crack 1,000 subs before the end of this year, we'll see if that happens. Most of these people are just a hair over 1,000, so they're not getting paid big bucks to do this. They're doing this because they love it. It's a cool hobby. Like me, they just kind of didn't see people talking about the things that they wanted to talk about, or talking about it in a different way or different details, and they felt they had something to contribute, and so they are. And so I want to talk about them, kind of point out some people you've probably heard of and some you probably haven't. Another one that I want to do is things that I think Star Citizen is going to need within the next year in order to kind of keep people engaged. That said, with Starfield dropping pretty soon, I honestly think that will take some pressure off CIG, because at least for a few months, probably through June of next year, most people are going to be head down playing Starfield. And then they'll kind of get tired of it. The run out of ways to replay it, and then they'll kind of trickle back to Star Citizen. Of course, you're going to have the people that are kind of doing the versus thing where I will never play Starfield because it's a rival game. That's not going to be me. I'm going to definitely do a Starfield playthrough, and we'll keep playing Star Citizen, and we'll probably be bringing you the playthrough that I'm going to do with my org, with the whole C, just kind of give you updates on that. And I will be doing that wild speculation on Sitcon. So if all that sounds fun, stick around, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you think I'm way off on these things, if you think I'm on target, if you have your own speculation for what's coming in Sitcon, I'll roll it into the show. I will shamelessly steal your idea. Talk to me later, guys. See you next time.